So what is going on, codedamn? My name is Mehul and welcome back to a brand new course. This one is going to be on integration and end-to-end testing with the help of Cypress. Now, Cypress is a very popular tool which is used in the wild by a lot of people to, just have integration and end-to-end testing in their code base to add a lot of confidence and strength when they are pushing their code to production. Now, this is a part of codedamn front-end developer learning path, and you are probably watching it here. Now, if you have not been following front-end developer learning path, I would kind of recommend you to do if you have no idea how you have landed on this course. But yeah, it's not like a compulsion to follow if you know all your way. But if you're somebody who's a new web developer who wants to get into coding, who is, just figuring out stuff and you have just landed here, this is the place where you can start. If you want to become a front-end developer, these are the first few steps which you can take. And once you're sort of in the middle, you can probably, once you feel confident for your code testing knowledge to be built up now, you can probably jump on this course. Now, this is going to be a thorough course of this particular module. We're going to be covering React testing library and Jest. Later on, this is not going to be a part of this one. We'll just focus on Cypress in this one and focus how you can test front-end applications end-to-end using this tool. Because this is a framework agnostic tool, that means it's not it's not something which depends on React, for example. React testing library depends on that. So it's pretty much a universal thing. You can test websites from React to Angular to Vue to basically static websites to highly dynamic custom websites with Cypress as well. We're going to get more into details of what Cypress is, how it works, why you would want it in the later videos, but this is a start. So that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video really soon. Alrighty everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just take a look at what Cypress exactly is, why you would want it, what the hell does this even mean? So you see what happens when you are on web, when you have written some content, when you have written some code, which publishes a website like this, or even codedamn, for example. A lot of times you're gonna realize that some things are, just done and dusted, right? So you have created this page, you have created this button, it's done and dusted. The next time you will probably change this is gonna be after ages, right? So you want to make sure that things which are not changing, or at least, all the things as much as you can get, are not breaking because of something unintentional, right? Now, maybe I just updated some setting page or some UI in some other place and this button broke, right? So that is unexpected change. I was not able to test it. So this is sort of the place where end-to-end testing would come in place, where you can write test for features you are definitely sure about that would not break at all and they are finalized and all that stuff. But these would be these tests right here, which we'll write eventually, are going to act as a layer of security that, hey, if this breaks, we'll just stop your deployment. That means it will not go to production or staging or whatever. So in order to understand it a little bit more in sort of better way, we have this official video from Cypress itself. So let me just go ahead and just pause it at the correct moment. Let's see where we can find it. So you can see right here, we're going to get into this interface later on as well. But this sort of window is how Cypress does it magic. So on the right, you're going to have a sort of your own web page which you're testing. And on the left, you're going to have a suite of tests which is linked to this particular page. Now, how Cypress works right now is much more interesting than existing technologies like Selenium. So if you have worked and known Selenium, you know that there's a sort of a layer which is between the browser and the Selenium testing framework, which handles all the events and everything. Cypress, on the other hand, works in a different but interesting way. That Cypress interface actually sits inside your browser, right? Now, it sits inside the browser and it performs all these actions using JavaScript code itself. So you have a node process in Cypress which communicates with this particular thing. That is fine. That is your task runner. But at the end of the day, your browser, your Cypress test suite is sitting inside your browser, and that is how it is performing all these tests and everything. So what does this mean? This means that you have much more control over your pages and DOM in general, because you don't have to do a lot of to and fro and all that stuff. But the only thing which I feel right now is a con of this, and we'll also explore it later on in depth, is that you kind of have to like suffer on the native side of things, native event side of things. What do I mean by that? Is that clicks and double clicks and all that stuff right now is programmatic in nature, which is in JavaScript. But that might have a little bit of different consequence when you're, working as a real user. But that is also fixable. You have different ways of like having native events now. I think the repository, one of the coolest repositories there for Cypress, which adds functionality for native events. So that's everything is for everything is for like a later time. But I just wanted to get into the basics of how Cypress is different from Selenium, right? Selenium works on a sort of compatibility layer. Cypress, on the other hand, sits inside your browser itself. And Cypress, as far as I know, is supported in all the major browsers now, including Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. So let's see. No, this support is different. But yeah, I guess it is supported on all the major browsers and all the, major operating systems as well. This is basically an Electron sort of interface, right? So there's that. So yeah, that's pretty much it on how Cypress works. We're gonna take a deep dive into how everything is working on the code level as well later on. But that's pretty much it for this video. In the next one, we're gonna discuss about what you can expect from this course and the prereqs, if there are any. Well, we actually discussed them, but still, let's just do a formal introduction to that. That is all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just quickly discuss about the course outcome and the prereqs for this particular course for Cypress, end-to-end testing and integration testing. So again, just like I said, you are probably here. That means I'm sort of expecting you to know at least the terminology and things all the way back, right? So definitely a big up for HTML and CSS basics. You should know them. Trust me, it's not hard. It's probably like a day's work to get familiar with them. JavaScript, will be using a lot of JavaScript, so syntax familiarity would always be appreciated. But if you're somebody who's new to JavaScript, you can technically, just skip JavaScript. But I've been designing this course in mind for people who are front-end developers, right? So we will be occasionally like, just going a little bit out of the way to just discuss how things are working. So JavaScript knowledge, the promises knowledge, at least the ES6 knowledge, is highly recommended, although not required, but is highly recommended. Then version control system is not necessarily needed, but if you know about it, it's good. But Cypress will not really require version control system, at least not till the very end, where we will discuss GitHub Actions. I'll come to that later on. Package managers is not much required. You should just know about npm node, and this node should be set up on your system. So that's a requirement, right? Then build tools is not really, Webpack वगैरह is not required. It's fine. React, Vue, Angular knowledge is not required again for this one. It's sort of independent, but the order is kind of like that. Again, CSS framework is not required, but the basic knowledge is required, The basics of CSS and HTML is required because we will be using a lot of selectors and stuff to get Cypress things. So yeah, that's basically it for the prereqs. About the course outcomes, I would say that you would pretty much be able to automate testing any single website, any dynamic, highly dynamic, static websites 100% after this particular course with the best practices. And as a bonus, I'm going to include the process of having continuous integration and deployment within GitHub CI platform as well. I use GitHub all the time for CI/CD. They have a very generous plan, and they give you a lot of free time for build minutes. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to be integrating Cypress testing in such a way that if your test fails, your build does not succeed. So that is the outcome of the course. You will be mastered in end-to-end testing, and you will know how and what all should you test and with the best practices. So that is pretty much it for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and quickly set up Node. I'll just probably give you instructions as this one, but because I'm assuming that most of you do have Node.js set up on your system already. If you do, then you can feel free to skip up this video. Just mark the video as done from the right and be done with it. If not, just go to nodejs.org and download by clicking on this button, right? If you are a Windows guy, just click on this, follow the wizard instructions, and you will be done in no time. For Mac OS, you can follow the same thing, or if you are not on Windows, or even if you are on Windows and you want a dedicated guide, just go to Google and write Node.js on Mac, right? If you're on Mac, for example. Click on any link. I would recommend like the first 3 link, any one of them. And just follow along a very simple guide. Like it uses Brew, which is absolutely fine to install Node. It's fine, right? Similarly, you can say Node.js on Ubuntu. And a pro tip is that if you can, look for DigitalOcean articles, right? DigitalOcean has pretty much high quality articles, which are easy to follow, and they have sort of a guideline for writing articles as well. I know about it. They have a particular section. But anyway, for digital, if you're following this article, I would say use NVM if you can do that as the setup, because it's a pretty cool way of managing your dependency, at least the version of Node. There's also a Volta alternative, but I would probably not recommend you getting into it as of now. But it's a pretty cool thing for people who want to be like highly experimental. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you will have Node set up automatically by the end of this video. I'm hoping you guys can do that. If not, let me know in the discussions below, and let's get into why you were not able to do that. That's all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one. So what is going on, codedamn? My name is Mehul, and welcome to another video in which we'll be taking a look at how we can set up Cypress in our project. Now, one thing which you can consider as a, sort of a good practice, or, whatever it is, I would recommend you guys to have your integration and unit test and end-to-end testing, everything in the same folder as the project which you are testing it. Now, it is technically possible to keep Cypress apart from your main project because there's not really any code sharing, but still it is a good practice. Why? Because when we will be using CI/CD to deploy it online automatically, that kind of obviously comes in help, because you will have the test included in the same repository, so it makes it much more easier to run those tests. But for the sake of this video, at least for some tutorials, unless we don't get a website of ours or whatever, we're gonna have a dedicated directory just for Cypress. So I'm just gonna create a directory here, Cypress testing. And this is the point like where Windows guys and Mac guys or Linux guys are all same. So just follow along with your favorite terminal. If you're on Windows, you can use CMD or, whatever you like. There's a hyper terminal, I guess. That's pretty cool. Mac OS, you guys have ZSH or Bash, whatever you're running, and Linux obviously has Bash with it. So just follow along. We're going to create a Cypress testing directory. And once you do that, we have to initialize an NPM project. Now here you have two options. You can either use yarn as your package manager, or you can use npm. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick with the popular one, that is npm, but feel free to use yarn. There's not really any difference as such. So I'm going to say npm init y, which is going to initialize a package.json file, right? Hopefully all of you guys are aware about what this package.json is. From the codedamn's front-end developer learning path, this module, right? We already covered this in very much depth, but still, if you just want to get a brief overview, just watch a couple of videos. That you should be fine. But for those of you who want a really 10-second crash course, package.json just manages the dependencies and scripts and execution and all that stuff for your project, right? Which is initialized with the help of npm or yarn. Both these package managers share the same file. Now, once we have this, the next step is to install Cypress itself. Now, we saw that Cypress is actually a huge browser-like tool, something like this, right? But it also ships as a node module. And the reason it ships as a node module is because Cypress also recommends that you should have a individual Cypress sort of installation per project. Is because just like any other software, it also brings in breaking changes, right? So if you have a global instance of Cypress, then that might work for some projects, that might not work for others. That's always a bad idea, right? So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to say npm install Cypress, and that's it, right? So this I is just a short form for install. Feel free to write install all the way. It's just one and the same thing. It'll take just a couple of seconds. Why? Because you can see once it installs sort of the module actually downloads Cypress again. And what is happening here, if you want to know about this, is that this in fact is downloading Cypress binary, right? Because Cypress is a full-fledged browser has a full-fledged browser under its control, right? Or at least it has an interface which can launch a browser completely under its control. Cypress by default ships with an Electron, a Chromium based browser, which is Electron. Okay, let's just first of all make sure this gets completed, then we'll continue. All right, so now you can see that once it is installed, it says you some instructions, but on to where we were before. Cypress ships with an Electron based browser, which is just a very bare bones version built on top of Chromium. But you can pretty much use any other browser as well with it if you like, right? So the next thing which you want to do once you have downloaded Cypress is open it up. And Cypress will actually, it says that there's this command, but what you can do instead of using this command is write npx, oops, not box, npx Cypress open. And once you hit this command, what's going to happen is internally it's just going to run the same command. You can see that Cypress open is same thing, but it's much cleaner on eyes. So it'll just open it. It might just take a couple of seconds to verify if it can run or not, which will obviously pass. So once it is done, it'll open it. Now, first things first, let me see if I can zoom this a little, because looks like it's way too small for us to see, but let's see. Anyway, I'll just make sure that I zoom in the video. So let's keep it in the small window because that will be easier for me. So anyway, you can see that I have a little bit of work going on here already. So I'm just gonna log out, and you can see that we have a little bit of browser setup here as well, because I have been using Cypress for my own work. So it is probably picking up from the global configuration or something. But anyway, what you can see is, first of all, this window right here, which you see is the Cypress test runner, right? And what has happened, if you go back to your terminal, if you give it a couple of, or maybe it just keeps it like, you know, in the terminal state. If you do an ls, you're gonna see we have a Cypress folder, and interestingly enough, you're gonna see that we have 4 folders inside this particular folder, right? Fixtures, integration, plugins, and support. Don't worry, all of them have their own specific meaning, why they are here, what they will be used for. We'll be getting into all of them, but that is pretty much the thing which you have to do in order to install Cypress for the first time. So this is a win. This is the first step. That is all for this video. We're going to continue in the next one. Hey codedamn, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and explore the Cypress testing this runner sort of thing, right? A little bit. So first things first, in order to open this, you have to say npx Cypress open, and there are multiple ways of running tests without this runner as well. We'll see it all later on. Don't worry about that. But this is sort of the way you're gonna test on local, right? When you're running it on your local system, which has a display and everything. So you see we have on the top, your interface might be a little different. If it is, just make sure your Cypress testing or whatever folder in which we initialize this is open, right? Hopefully it should be. But if not, you can just click on that open project or something like that, which will appear, and you should be good to go. So once you are in this project, you're going to see that because this is a blank project, we have some examples of integration test right here. This is in the test tab. In the runs, we have a sort of an advertisement for Cypress dashboard, but it's not really, you know, just an ad. It is actually a very good tool for managing all your runs as well inside CI/CD, and has a very generous free tier as well. So that's a good thing. But anyway, Moving on to settings, which is sort of the interesting part, you're going to see this is the configuration, and configuration is something which you can override, right? We're going to learn about this later on with the cypress.json file. So this configuration, some parameters you can override, just like, for example, let's see. We can see that there's this parameter Chrome Web Security, which will have, all sorts of CORS check, or, just like Cypress cannot work with iframes very well right now. So those sort of checks can be disabled if you set it to false, although I wouldn't recommend that. We have this default command timeout, which is set to 4 seconds. I'm going to cover that. So all these parameters are sort of tweakable to you, right? These are available to you. Then you can see it runs the Node.js version 12.18.3, which is sort of fine. You don't really have to mess around with this one. Node 12 is fairly advanced. You won't really need a lot of features from Node 14 or 15 as of now. So that is a good one. Proxy settings, we don't really have to get into proxy settings at the moment, but it is sort of, something we might explore later on. File opener preferences is, we won't really need this stuff, right? And experiments is, we're not going to get into that later on. So the crux of this whole thing basically lies in the test suite, in the test tab, right? And let's just go ahead and click on any one of them. I'm not actually sure which one it will launch. So let's see. So you can see that we go to a website called example.cypress.io, and it is doing some sort of amazing things, right? Automatically, I'm not even doing anything, and it just started running everything. So that is pretty cool. And that is something we'll be actually showing you. I'll be teaching you how you can build something like this. And you see it passes all the tests in the test suite. 14 passed, none failed in 18 seconds. Pretty cool stuff. And it did it all by itself. So this is how you're going to run different tests. So if you go ahead and open this, let's go back and let's open this in VS Code. I'm using VS Code. Feel free to use anything else if you want. Cypress, integration, and this thing, right? So you see all of these are actually, we were executing this particular file, right? actions.spec.js. So this is the file which was executing, and this file actually commanded the Cypress browser in a certain way that, hey, you have to do this, and it all was done like a magic, right? So that is what this exploring test runner would allow you to do. That is, you can just select a file which you want to execute. You might want to just run all the tests as well if you want. That's also possible, but you can use individual files like this in order to run them, right? And we're going to cover this interface later on. It's pretty exciting, but can become overwhelming if I just start with everything from the very start. So anyway, that's pretty much it for the runner overview. There's not really a lot you can do right here inside the runner itself. But yeah, the tool is amazing, right? The tooling is amazing around it. That's all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video really soon. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at sort of hello world in Cypress, right? Because why the hell not? That's what we do as programmers the first time we do anything. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to keep this examples folder right here just for you guys. I would also say just keep it. Why? Because this will have a lot of snippets which you can, just peek around, and, if you want to have a look how or different things are working, you can use it, right? You might learn a thing or two when you're reading these snippets. So I'm going to keep it, but I need a clean folder to work with. So I'm going to start off with a different folder name, and I'm just going to say my own test, right? You can name it anything pretty much. And right here, I'm going to start by saying this is hello world.test.js, right? It does not really has to end with .test.js, but it's fine. It's a good convention sort of, you also get the benefit of free icons and everything from VS Code if you have that set up. So first things first, what I'm going to do is from this file itself, I'm going to copy this top line. And you might wonder, why is that? The reason I would do that is C. If I start writing describe now, you're going to see that we get this autocomplete and, all the nice things available within the VS Code TypeScript sort of autocomplete interface, right? So let me just go ahead and give this a title real quick. And now I'm going to write Cypress cy dot, and we get all this autocomplete. This is only possible because of this line, because this line tells that, hey, we actually have types defined for this particular file which we'll be using. So go ahead and search for this particular types. And I just command clicked on this, and you can see these are the types for this particular thing. If you're not into TypeScript and if you have no idea like what TypeScript is and how it works, don't really worry about this yet. Just know that this line is required for providing the nice autocomplete features and functionality. All right, so what the hell is happening here? First of all, let's get into that. So you're gonna see that all of your tests are gonna contain, all of the test files are gonna contain this describe block, right? So this is just a convention, just it's not like it's not a functional code. It's not doing anything code-wise. It's just, here to organize your tests, right? Once you write describe inside this particular function, you can see this is a function, right? You can also write function here if you want, if you're an old school boy, but I'm just gonna go with arrow function. So it's a function, and inside this function, it's gonna look for certain tests, right? And how do you, just group those tests? By saying it, right? So every single block inside the it is gonna be a test. Now, this is important because I'm gonna say this as test1, and I'm gonna specify this function right here, right? And this function right here, which you see right here, this function is gonna execute. And if this function executes properly, correctly, not really like throwing errors or anything, then this test passes. Otherwise, this test fails. And if this test fails, then, that means something is wrong. If it passes, then this test is done, right? So that's all. So for example, if I do nothing right here, and if I just say this is empty test, right? And if I do nothing, let's go to our test runner right here, go back a little with the folder and click on this hello world.test.js. Right here, you can see pretty much it passes, right? Well, some frameworks like Jest have a behavior that they just fail the empty test, but Cypress passes the empty test. So you can see there's nothing, no command, anything at all. So obviously the default behavior is to just pass it. Now let's just go ahead and see if I throw new error, oops, something like this in this test. And if I go ahead inside this particular browser and see, you can see that this test fails because there was an error, right? It does not necessarily have to be a JavaScript based error, as we'll see. If there's a Cypress based error that this element is not found or not clickable, all that stuff, then also the test will fail. And accordingly, you have to work, right? So that's pretty much it. So, all right. So the hello world sort of equivalent for this one would be to like just visit some website and verify if they have something, right? So just stick with me here. We're going to cover this later on as well. To visit a website with Cypress, what you have to do is say cy.cy. This cy is just Cypress, right? It's automatically available. You don't have to like import it or anything. This would be available in the global scope. So just say cy.visit and pass in the URL. For example, in this case, I'm just going to visit codedamn.com because why not? So once we do that, you can see it automatically refreshes it and executes the command. And I guess it just zooms out automatically every time. So that would be a pain to zoom in all the time. But you can see I can just refresh the test and it starts the test number one. That is the thing. You can see it visits codedamn.com and it shows me that, hey, there were a couple of sort of AJAX requests as well along the way. So I just made them. So that's just fine. We don't really need to get into that. But this is the idea, right? So you have visited codedamn.com. That's it. You are not testing anything. So that's fine. So this is sort of like a hello world sort of thing in Cypress where you have at least some command issued in order to pass the test. So yeah, that's pretty much it. In the next one, we're going to be seeing how you can execute this whole thing, but without a browser, right? And just discuss why that would be helpful as well. So that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and see how you can run this test again, but without a browser. Now, why the hell would you want to do that? The reason you would want to do that is because, first of all, if you have like, multiple browser tests and all that stuff, if you want to do that on a CI/CD environment, a continuous integration and deployment environment, which is on a remote server, which does not have a display, then it's a little bit of problem. You can you can get a virtual display. Obviously that is possible with Linux variants, but the ideal way would be to like somehow be able to do it in a headless way, right? Headless just means that you do not have the GUI with you. So that is completely, definitely, for sure possible with Cypress. The way you can do that is using npx cypress run. If you do this, it's just gonna run it and just pass in headless like this, right? So if you do a run like this, just give it a couple of seconds to breathe, and you can see right here, it says run starting. It's starting browser Electron in a headless mode, right? So that means, you know, Electron GUI isn't visible. Okay, I guess it's just starting to run all the action example spec. But anyway, you get the idea, right? So you were able to run headless tests without actually spinning up a browser. So that's basically it for, you know, this video purpose. I wanted to just show you how you can run it. I would not want you to run your test headless when you're developing. Why? Because it always is great to have a UI and, you know, just to see all the things happening. But this is super useful in an environment like CI/CD. And don't worry if you want to have, you know, if you want to have sort of screenshots and video recordings in that CI/CD environment as well. That is also possible. Don't worry about that. But just so you know that headless testing is possible with Cypress as well. So this is something you should know. So that is all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one. So what is going on, codedamn? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just quickly go over through this folder structure which we have right here. Now, we're going to start with the fixtures one. So you see Cypress by default, when you install it, it's just going to create 4 folders. You know, video appeared later on. The first 4 folders were these 4. So fixtures right here, this folder will contain the data, the dummy data, which you might want to use when you're testing stuff. Now, this is sort of, you know, sometimes what you want is maybe an API is too expensive to call, or maybe you don't have access to that particular API from public internet. So what you can do is you can move the data from that particular API into a JSON-like file right here inside this fixtures folder itself and just place it. Now you might wonder, like, why fixtures? Why not, you know, just place it right here and import it by default? Well, fixtures is because Cypress provides out-of-the-box support for importing and using these files directly, instead of, you know, you importing it manually in your test and just using it. So that will work absolutely fine. You can import your JSON data, all that data stuff inside this fixtures folder, and that is all fixtures is about, right? That is all its purpose is. Integration is the important folder for your test and everything, because your spec files, this is how it is called, test files or spec files. I prefer test. Some people prefer spec. It's fine. Your test files would be living inside this integration folder, and you can create multiple folders inside this to categorize your test files. But each test file right here, just like we discussed, will contain a single describe. It can contain multiple, but I would rather recommend you to contain single. And it can have, you know, multiple tests, right? So this describes a suite of tests, and these are like individual tests, which are independent, which should be independent from each other, right? So this is how your integration test would look like. Then plugins, this plugin sort of thing is something we would probably not use in this particular course, but just to tell you what this is, it's sort of like a way to extend the functionality of Cypress. For example, you would learn about, like, it's sort of tricky to get OAuth, that is, you know, sign in with Google or Facebook, working with Cypress, because it is a different domain, right? You change domains, you have to open a pop-up, all that stuff. Cypress wants to just deal with the contents within the single tab window, right? That is your own website. So you can hook in a plugin which sort of uses Puppeteer under the hood to perform an OAuth authentication and gives you back the result. So that is sort of the use case of plugins, right? It can extend your functionality of the existing Cypress installation. And finally, we have support. This support right here, you can think of as, you know, this commands.js, you can just see that by the looks of it. You can see it allows you to create custom commands, number one, but more generically, it allows you to create reusable code, right? Because commands, what is command, right? This commands which we'll use, visit, this, everything, all that stuff, is at the end of the day, it's a bunch of reusable code, right? Which is written once and you can use it again and again. So support is a folder which you can use to have reusable code, right? If you have a big operation like logging in a user is a bunch of lines, you can move that here and then call it again and again when in different test files or different test suites, and you should be good to go. So this is like an overview of these 4 folders. This videos is gonna be the video demonstration of how your tests are performing, right? So this is actually a video recording which you can play back. Super useful to check what is going wrong in a CI/CD environment, because logs can only help you so far. If you can actually see in the video what's happening in the whole GUI front, that really helps. So that is pretty much it for this video. In the next one, we're going to be starting off by testing codedamn website itself. Now, why I'm doing that? Because first of all, I own codedamn, so that should not be a problem. And second of all, I'm just gonna, cover a lot of edge cases with codedamn website itself. Because, once we go into the projects and learning aspect of, the custom terminal and themes and all that stuff, you're gonna see a lot of different ways to approach problems. So that is pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's start with some real testing so that we can get input on how Cypress really works and how it is powerful. So first things first, I'm gonna obviously I'm saying that I'll be using codedamn.com. You can use codedamn.com for learning, but I'll be just demonstrating you with the automated testing as well. Feel free if you want to do this, but just make sure you're not abusing any sort of system or endpoint. Other than that, I would say that it would be fairly, we'll be covering a lot of cases, like for example, clicking on these buttons, and if you resize this, what you're gonna see, well, the dimensions are different, but if we change the viewport, which we'll be seeing, then this would collapse into actually a complete navbar. So we're gonna be having a lot of fun testing this website, right? If this works or not with the end-to-end testing. So first things first, what you have to do is whenever you write a test, you have to visit a particular URL, right? Because, well, what's the point of end-to-end testing otherwise? So if you comment this out, you're going to see that it just, sits blank like this. So let me see if I can just, merge these two so that it's easier for us to just see things. Hopefully I can have a little bit of more space here and a little bit of decreased font size, and hopefully that is visible to everybody. Let me see if I can make a little bit of more arrangements. Not really. I don't think this is gonna fit very well, but anyway, okay, let's just go ahead and keep it separate. Why not? So here we are back with our basic zoom, and now once you have visited a URL, you're gonna see that you have that particular URL visible in the Cypress browser window. Now if you go ahead and take a look into under the hood things, what you're gonna see is, let me just go ahead and zoom into the dev tools a little bit. You're gonna see that this is your main page, that is codedamn.com. Well, the URL says codedamn.com, but eventually you're gonna see that this website right here is running inside an iframe, right? And your Cypress runner surprisingly is also running on codedamn.com. So that means this runner right here can inject code inside and get information inside and outside using JavaScript, right? Because they are sharing the same origin. So this is why Cypress can sit in the browser and can do all sorts of work which you would think might be impossible, like clicks and all that stuff, because Cypress shares the same URL, same domain name as your current runner, right? Which is embedded inside the iframe. So anyway, that's one thing. But the next one is that you gotta test something. So I'm gonna name this as basic test, and I'm gonna say this one says that we have correct, title, or just page title, whatever. So once I visit this, what I want to check is that, hey, make sure that this text right here is available, right? Maybe this is like a tagline or slogan or whatever. So I want to make sure this is available. And the way I will do it is I'll say cy.contains, and this contains right here is gonna select text based select element based on what the element contains, right? So in this case, we're gonna have coding, learning, and connecting with developers around the world. So I'm gonna paste this right here, save it, and we're gonna see that, you know, this test passes. You can see the contains right here. If you hover over it, it says that, well, we found this and we have a green test. Let's say if I rename it something like this, go back, it visits codedamn.com, but you can see that, hey, it's looking for, you know, maybe we can get that test, maybe not. And finally, we did not get it. So the error also says that, hey, we expected to find this text, but we did not. We did not find it, right? So this is how a very simple test and very simple sort of thing will fail. Now, you might ask that, hey, if you have partial text, then what's going to happen? You're going to see that Cypress by default will allow partial testing, right, of the text on the screen, which is kind of, you know, the way they have programmed it, because libraries like React testing library do not go that by default. But anyway, this is something you should know, that even if you have a partial text match, just coding, you know, coding might be present 10 different places, but it's just going to work, right? So that's one thing you should be aware about. So the contains method right here is a special one because it searches for text inside the element, which if you use it on cy, it's basically the whole screen. So it's going to search for this text, and yeah, that's basically what contains do, right? So if I click on, you know, if I want to get start learning as the element, and if I want to do something with it, we'll just cover that later on. So yeah, start learning exists. That's why it's true. Otherwise, it will just fail because it will not be able to find this element. So contain would fail if it does not find that particular element, and it will just, you know, just sit right there if it is found. So anyway, a better way would be, and a more explicit way would be to say like should right here and say exist, right? Now this is plain English. If you have worked with any JS framework before, this is basically the syntax from Mocha library. Mocha or Mocha, I don't know how you pronounce that. I've never really checked the pronunciation myself, but Mocha is how I say it. So this is basically the syntax of that, right? Under the hood, Cypress uses that syntax. So you can see now when we use the .should, it converted into an assertion, which is pretty much how people are used to code integrated or end-to-end tests, right? However, just like I told you, even if you do not perform this assert, implicitly it means the same thing, right? Because you have to get that element in order to pass this test. Just like I said, if that element is not found, it's just gonna fail the test anyway, right? So it's just waiting for the element to be found. Nope, time's up and it's failed. So that's how it works, the contains method. We're gonna have another method which you might be using very frequently, that is the cy.get. And we're going to cover that in the next video. But that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video really soon. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at how we can use cy.get method, which basically is sort of like how contains would work, but it is more like a CSS selector based thing, right? So if you want to ever get elements based on how you would select elements on the page, this is what you should be using. Now, how do we make use of this? For example, let me just go ahead and just throw in a div right here, right? And I'm just gonna probably save it. And chances are that there is a div which exists on the page. In fact, there are 69 divs, which is nice, on this page. So yeah, I mean, this is completely a coincidence. I did not know that there were so many nice pages, but anyway, what the deal with get is that you're going to use any sort of syntax which you will use. You can use any sort of syntax inside this particular get thing. What do I mean by that? Maybe let's just go ahead and take a look inside the inspect element, and let's search for example, we have the top one as div id app. So you can either go for div ash app, something like this. You're going to see that it is found, in fact, Oh, it is not found because this is like Cypress source code, right? Not the codedamn one. So let's just go to, let's just go to codedamn.com, and you're gonna see inside inspect, we have the div ID root and div ID __ next. So root, for example, if we go ahead and see that, you're gonna see, well, we find it, right? You can throw in an assertion if you want, but by default, it implicitly is asserted anyway, right? Now you can also have something like div ID no root should not exist. I mean, you can just go ahead and add all sorts of tests like this, but that won't really make any sense unless, you know, this has existed sometime in the past. So anyway, this is how you can use .get, basically put in any selector. You know, you have done div ID root like this. You can also do div ID root, which is like sort of a generic way of targeting attributes, and it'll also work. That's particular, that is absolutely fine. For example, now if we go ahead, why this one thing you should be aware about is that try avoiding get on selectors which are brittle. What do I mean by that? That means the very best example in case of codedamn, the production build of codedamn, you can see uses these garbage class values, right? And how do they use these garbage class values? Because I'm using something known as CSS modules on this website, which converts the website's CSS class names into garbage values like these, so that there is no collision of styles or style names at least. So my test, if I just code them up on how they would work on local, they would absolutely fail on any staging or production environment. Why? Because the class names are gone. So instead of using class names as the pretty much the holders of information, what you should use is something known as custom attributes. Now, I don't remember if I am actually having, I'm actually having a couple of them here. So you see that on codedamm's production build, even on production build, it's absolutely fine to have, you know, this is a common attribute, data-test ID. Now, anything which you write data star, that means, you know, data star, anything which is an HTML attribute like this is ignored by the browser engine, right? So it has no specific meaning as such. I mean, with image, for example, you can see src is a pretty important attribute, right? Because it decides what images you have to see. But data-star attributes, anything after data dash, is pretty much not relevant to HTML. So you can use this, data.testID is a common one. You can use this to specify a very solid sort of identifier to that particular element and then target it. For example, let me just give you a very quick example. Let's say that this button right here, we want to have integration or end-to-end test for this, that this button right here should work properly, right? So in order to select this button, I have a bunch of ways to go about. The first one is I can just go ahead inside the code. I'm just going to say way one is this cy.contains start learning, right? Second way could be to, you know, use get right here and say probably something like, you know, async component div and a, right? So I can probably say async component div a, and then I can just, you know, probably just assert that this contains start learning, or, you know, this has the correct functionality. Way 3, however, and the recommended way would be to use something known as, you know, data test ID, an attribute, and then let's say learn button, for example, and then work with this. So you can clearly see the difference between all these three. The first one, is it brittle or not? Just give it a thought, that is it like, should you go with an approach like this or not? Well, mostly not. Why? Because it might be possible that you might change this button's text later on. So maybe it's like from start learning to, for example, get started, right? And once you do that in your code, your test would fail. And if your test would fail, you have to update your test as well. So if you want your test to fail, if you change the button, then, well, it's good enough, right? For example, this test literally says that we have correct page title. So I would expect this to fail if the page title, that is probably this or maybe this, whatever you want page title to be, to change, right? So if it changes, then you might want this particular test to fail. But if you don't want to fail it, I mean, if the text is not really a dependency of the test being successful, then you should go with something else. Way 2, is it brittle or not? Again, this is brittle. Why? Because these class names could change and will change, at least in this case, because we are on a very sort of production build where the class names actually don't have any value at all. So again, class names should not be used if those are, you know, supposed to change, or maybe you can change them later on, because, you know, you might be removing, or if you're using something like Tailwind, for example, then again, you do not have a lot of choice of using class names like this. So the best way for elements which might change their text or CSS or styles and all that stuff is to use a custom attribute, which will not change, definitely sure, because it has no work at all in the markup of the language. So for example, if we see data test ID, we have a menu toggle, we have a menu close, and that's basically it. But we should probably have more of the data test ID. I will probably add more of them in the upcoming videos on the main website so that we can test. But yeah, that is how you should do it, right? So that is how you should select it. So if I go ahead, and if we go ahead and see in the Cypress window, we can see we are already running in a small window size. So we have a menu toggle sort of thing available to us. So let's just go ahead and select this one. And right here, I'm just going to show you a very quick example that it works. Data test ID, this thing, and I'm just going to say click, right? Hit save, go back, and we're going to see that, you know, when the test ends, it has the menu open, right? So if you hover over this state, you're going to see we get a indication here saying DOM snapshot, which is also interesting. We'll come to that later on. But just to give you an idea, you can sort of travel back in time with Cypress, right? So once it is done, this is the final state of the thing. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. In the next one, we'll be exploring more about Cypress. You know, we just used a should. What is that? How you should use assertions and all that stuff in the next one. So that's all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at cy, that is Cypress.should. Now, what that is, why we need it, all that stuff. Let's just go ahead and take a look into this one. Now, remember that we will actually discuss the architecture of Cypress briefly, not really architecture, but how this really works probably in the advanced section. So that this thing right here, the thing which should and why we are using it, will become absolutely crystal clear when you see that video. But for now, just stick with me. So in Cypress, you're going to see that things are a little different, right? If you are coming from a JavaScript world, you know that this looks like synchronous code. And, you know, once you have visited, you are like immediately getting it. You know, you're getting the element directly and you're clicking it and you're just continuing with your work later on as well. Shouldn't you, you know, sort of await here? Maybe. Shouldn't you wait for the page to load if you're coming from a Puppet or a world? If you have a little bit of idea of JavaScript, how JavaScript works, you know that this could not be synchronous, right? You cannot really force JavaScript to wait. I mean, you can, but Cypress isn't doing that. So how this is working? Well, just like I said, we'll cover that in the architecture in the advanced section. But what you have to realize is that because the way Cypress is coded, you cannot do something like this. You cannot do something like this and then try to say element.text equal to hello, right? You cannot say something like this. This is completely garbage for Cypress, and we'll come to that in the advanced section. But a general rule of thumb is that if you are using let or var or const or basically variable declaration in the top level scope of your test, that probably means you're doing something wrong, right? This is a general rule of thumb. This is not how things work in Cypress, right? You will not really need variables to store data like this in the top level scope. So with that being out, what is the next thing you have to do is you have to, the topic of this video was the should thing, right? So you can, right now, you can just think that cy.get gets you the element. And now in order to assert on that particular element, you have to use should, right? Just like we have expect inside Mocha for, well, this comes from chai. So just like we have expect, should right here also helps you assert stuff. So should has a bunch of properties, right? So if you see in the autocomplete, you're gonna see a lot of things, you know, be above, be greater than, be less than, be called, be false, be true, you know, all that stuff. So what is all this? Well, think of it in this way. For example, let's say you want to get, let's see, this is going to be a little bit ironic because I'm just going to get it with contains. But assume that we have got an element right here with us from a selector or whatever. And I want to verify that its text is the same thing or not. So what I can say is inside this should, I can start looking for have text, right? So you can see that it showed me this particular thing. And then I can write the text ready to start for free, something like this, and hit save. And obviously, because, you know, we are selecting the same text, so that actually has the text. But, you know, you can just play around a little. If I just say ready to start here, hit save. We got the same element, we selected the same element, but in fact, it has the same text. So this will right now, this will fail, right? So if I have ready to start right here, you're gonna see that it is expecting this particular element to just contain ready to start. But it fails obviously because it has ready to start for free, right? So this is an exact match right here, which you're seeing in the assert. So the way should worked is that you take up a property which exists on the element, which probably exists as the text value as well. It will most likely exist, you don't have to worry. And you compare it with another value if applicable. So should has very basic use cases as well, like should exist. So ready to start should exist. That's fine. You know, you can have a very basic check of everything exists, like every basic element exists on the screen. So you don't really want to ship a production build where something is missing by chance, right? So you are having a title. So you can probably say something like data test ID title should exist, and you know, a bunch of other things. And if all of them pass, then you actually move on to the next test, right? That's an approach. That's something you could do. Technically, it's very well feasible and very much possible as well in a production environment. But yeah, that is how the should sort of thing would work. And you can also use not exist, but there are other cases where you will use not exist, but that's one of the things which you can do. Then just like we discussed, you can have text, you can have be equal, I guess be not really equal, be above or be or greater than, you know, you can just play around with the autocomplete to get it. We should have an equal, yeah. So we have an EQ. So if you already have text, or you know, if you have other node or something like that, which you can equate with something else, then you can use it. Basically a lot of options, but yeah, that's how you're going to do it. So that's all for this video. In the next one, by the next one, let me just go ahead and figure out, just set up a little bit of more data IDs here so that we can just play around a little bit more. That's all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next video. So what is going on, everybody? My name is Mehul and welcome back to another video in which we'll be exploring how we can change the viewport of the original browser. Now, there are a bunch of reasons you want to do that. The first one is absolutely clear to you because right now we are sort of in a tablet mode on codedamn, because I don't really want this to appear right now when we are trying to test the desktop version, right? You can have a separate test suite completely just for mobile based layouts. So that's absolutely fine if your code is different. So what you can do in order to do that is you can say cy.viewport right here. And right here, you have a bunch of options to go about, right? So first thing is you can make use of as you know, as a width and height. So I can say 1280720. So it's gonna set a very simple 1280720 view of the browser, and you can right now you can see that we get a, you know, typical browser desktop like interface. You can also specify a sort of thing, a sort of device which you want. Now this is not obviously going to turn your browser into that device, but it'll use that particular device ratio, right? So what's going to happen now is that you can go ahead and, let's say I go with iPhone 5 for example, hit save, go back, and you can see our aspect ratio changes to 320 cross 568, right? So you don't really manually have to, like, you know, set up mobile device sizes if you're trying to go for responsive things. So that's how it works. Now obviously if you're just testing for a PC or a large display, like it also has got MacBook options, that's fine, you can go ahead and do that. But you can also stick to a 720 display by just setting width and height. I personally like this a little bit better because I have control over the exact width and height, so that's fine. But once we have that, you can now see that, well, you have a different sort of view altogether. You can go ahead and take a look at something like, you know, if you want to have mobile like testing iPhone 10, and you can say every basic element exists on mobile. So you can have two test suites now. You can see we have two tests now. The first one runs on the desktop variant and the second one runs on mobile variant, right? So pretty cool stuff. Again, just out of the box functionality by Cypress. So that's how this all works, right? So we're going to be starting off with the desktop version. So that's what we'll be focusing on. So that's all for this video. In the next one, let's see how we can test more stuff and do cool automation with Cypress. So what is going on, everybody? My name is Mehul and welcome back to another video in which we'll be finally starting to mess around a little bit by clicking stuff, right? Because as an end user, when you are on a new website, the way you really interact with most of the website is by clicking on the stuff, right? Clicking on the links, watching content here and there. So let's just go ahead and see how we can click stuff. We have actually seen it already in a couple of videos back, but let's just go ahead and see it again. So I'm going to first of all try to get this get started URL with me, right? So I'm going to say cy.contains get started, and you might be right if you're thinking that, hey, Mehul, it'll fail if it, you know, changes, and that's exactly what I want to, you know, I want to have that particular behavior. If this is changed, if this is text is changed, that should fail. But yeah, we won't really worry a lot about that stuff when we are learning stuff. So you can safely ignore that. That sort of comes in the best practice section, to be honest. So once we have that element, I'm just going to click it. It's as simple as that. So we load the page, we click on that element, and you can see we are on the registration page now, right? The form is open, you can click around. It's actually a real page. So instead of like, you know, using registration as the thing, because we have CAPTCHA here and oath login here, we're going to be making use of sign in, right, instead. So let's just go ahead and click on sign in. And let's see, let's make this as, you know, the web page loads at least, right? And we can just cut this, paste this back, remove this. We can open a new tab and we can say login page looks good. So I can say something like this and cy.visit something like this, cy.contains sign in .click. Now, once we do that, the web page looks good, loads at least, login page looks good as well. So once we are on the login page, you can go ahead and see that we have, if we go ahead inside this input field, you can see that we should have a data test ID somewhere here, right? Menu close, you can see we have a data test ID on a little bit of parent of this input field, which is fine. I mean, Cypress is sort of smart enough to detect that, hey, here's an input field and we want to type into that, so it will type that. We'll see how we can type later on, but for now what we can do is we can just verify if everything works just according to what we want. So we're gonna say login page looks good. I just want to make sure that, hey, this element, you know, login into your account, this sort of thing should exist, right? So should exist. So once you have done that test, and when you're running these tests, right, what you can do is you can just throw in an only right here so that you're not really rerunning every test in the whole test suite, because that's what's happening right now, right? If you change that, it just, just runs that particular test. So that's a sort of a speed hack for your development thing. So the login in your account looks good. We can just throw in a check for Google, can't speak. Go with Google and go with Facebook. So go with Google should exist and go with Facebook should exist as well. So yep, both of them exist. The forgot password, these things are handy because you don't really want any update to mess up with this sort of flow, because these things are easy to miss, but could have a really bad user impact, because if somebody has forgot their password, they can't really log in, right? So that's a big thing. So forgot password should exist, and let's see, register an account. Register an account should also exist, right? So yeah, everything works fine, everything looks fine, everything exists. So that's a good thing. So this is how you're gonna write a very basic login page looks good. In the next video, let's just go ahead and copy this function and verify the login page links work, right? So all these links, forgot password, register an account, and yeah, that's basically it, because these two are just OAuth logins. So these should work. So we're gonna do that in the next video, just verify if their links are correct or not. So that is all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next one. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and see how we can verify the links are working fine. Now, obviously you can go ahead and slice up the attribute of this particular thing. If I just go ahead and click on sign in manually, I'm not really testing it right now. And if I click on this, you can sort of, if you want, inside the DOM itself, you can just slice away this particular href value right here and be done with it. But there's a much cleaner and better way, and that is to actually click this, right? Because this is your own website. You're not really redirected anywhere, and it's not an expensive call, anything like that, and it'll work. So instead of like slicing them, what we can do is I can say, hey, cy.contains forgot password. First of all, what I want is to click on that first step, right? Next step is I want to verify whether I'm on the right page or not. Now, in order to do that, what we're going to do is say cy.url. And again, you might be thinking, hey, let's just go ahead and get this into current URL and then assert somehow that URL is equal to something like this. But remember, again, as a general rule of thumb, if you are declaring variables in the top scope, you're doing something wrong, right? So this is wrong approach, because just like every other thing which Cypress works with, cy.url is also chainable. That means you have to chain over it in order to verify. Now, the URL also has the should thing, which most likely you will be using a lot of times. So I'm going to say the cy.url, this is actually a string, right, of the actual URL you are on right now. So I'm going to say this should include, remember, I'm not saying eq or equal, because I'll tell you why. I'm using include, and I am just saying password reset, right? And hit save. So let's see if this works. Well, obviously not, because we are not on the login page. So first of all, let's just click on contains. What do we have in here? Oops, sign in, right? So sign in dot click. And once we are on the sign in page, that is the login page, we click on login. And we are seeing there's a problem here. We don't really want this line. And you can see our test passes, right? And you can see the new URL, which you see right here, is this particular thing, which Cypress, very generously logs for us. So this new URL right here, you can see this is the full URL. Now you can, if you want to be extremely strict, you can go ahead and do something like this. And now you can go ahead and replace this with EQ, and it will also work just fine. But I sort of like try to avoid this because, if you get the path right, chances are your URL is also right? Because EQ would kind of fail on this one because, well, that's not a valid URL, right? So I just change it to include, and that's fine. So this is how you can check if you're on the right page, which sort of you can do. Next thing is, in order to get back on the page itself, just go and say cypress.go back, and you should be back to your sign in page. So the steps are here. You go to sign in page, then you go to password reset page, then you finally verify your page URL, and then you go back, that is on the sign in page, right? Then again, you can run the same test for cy.contains. What else we had? Register an account. And when I click on this, I should say that cy.url should include register, right? Because obviously, if you click on register an account, you should be taken to registration page. And you can see by the end of the test suite, we are also on the registration page, and everything looks just beautiful. So that is all for this particular video, how you can test URLs of pages. Let's explore more into Cypress. There's a lot we can do. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new section in which we'll be diving a little bit deep into Cypress testing. We have explored some things, but not quite there yet. So let's just go ahead and explore a little bit more. Starting off with how you're gonna log into this beautiful interface of Cypress. Now, you have this, sort of logs going on. Cypress is trying to help you as much as it can, but you can use this to log additional information if you want. For example, you can say, cy.log, and that's how you do it actually, with using cy.log, going to forgot password, hit save, and you can see once this is completed, you can see that you get the statement going to forgot password just before you check the element and click it, right? So that's how you can log stuff. Now, one common pitfall you're gonna see people do right here is, for example, you might be tempted to go ahead and do something like, this. Current URL is equal to cy.url. And the problem with this is that this code right here, I don't really want to get into the way how Cypress works right away, but the thing here is that this code does not evaluate immediately, right? This is a lazy evaluation. I mean, when Cypress actually runs all of your code, none of the actions have actually happened in the main browser window because, well, they are all asynchronous, right? That's what we talked about, but that's getting into a little bit of more architecture side. So this will not work, just so you know. But if you want to know, just stick along. We'll be coming to that in the advanced section very soon. I'm very excited to discuss that. But yeah, this sort of thing would not work. If you want to make it work, what you can do is you can just chain it for the moment using something known as then. It kind of returns a promise. It's not a promise like API. You cannot really await on this, but it has a then method which can resolve with the value. And you can now say cy.log the current real URL is, and you can say the value, right? If I try this same thing without, just like this, like we discussed, let's see what's the difference. So hit save. We go ahead and see, you can see the current real URL is, that's what we get when we are doing, cy.log something like this. But if we do the current real URL, which is the second statement, actually, let me just go ahead and make this a little bit more clear, not clearer. So you can see the current URL is, we get this object right here, right? So this is not usually the way to go about when you're trying to print. If you really want to print a value of a variable, then you can use a .then, so that you wait for it to actually evaluate the promise and just complete everything in the chain and then use that. But nonetheless, one thing you might have seen is that you cannot really use console log. I mean, you can, but where these console logs would appear is not here. They would appear in the main page. So if you open developer tools And right here, you can see your console logs appear right here, right? So yeah, just make sure of that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this particular video. That's how you console log beautiful stuff into the beautiful terminal or the console, which Cypress provides by default. So that is all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next video very soon. So what is going on, everybody? My name is Mehul and welcome back. And in this video, let's just see how we can type stuff with Cypress. And this is gonna be, used a lot of times, so you should know about this. So first things first, where you have to type, right? You have to detect where the field you have to type. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say that this login should work fine. Although the Cypress documentation states that, just logging into the UI using Cypress is an anti-pattern, but we're still gonna do that because we want to type stuff. And ideally, the other way is to just, use some other way to get an access token or some sort of authentication, and then use Cypress just for the regular UI testing. So it's fine. Anyway, we can just go ahead and copy this thing. Actually, I'm just gonna get into the repetition of code as well later on when we learn about before and beforeEach, but stick with me. So once we are here, the next thing I'm gonna do is go to the sign up page, that is the sign in page. And then I'm just gonna, let me just throw in an only here real quick and get rid of this one. I'm gonna type into the field. Now, first of all, just like I said, the best way to get the field is using data test ID. So that's what I've been saying, that, this field right here has a data test ID of username. Now, it does not matter what sort of classes and, all that hierarchy it has got. As long as we have data test ID with us, we are good to go. So I'm going to say cy.contains, not really contains, .get data test ID equal to username. Once I have this element, what I want to do is type something into this. Now, if I type in, admin, and I know that password is the other field, you can verify it as well from the DevTools, but I know it. This one is the password. So if I have something like this, and if I hit save, and if I just let it type, you can see by the end of it, it is so fast that it just goes ahead and types the whole thing, right? But you would get the idea that this is actually typing with the actual keyboard. Not really actual keyboard, it's just manipulating it to show that text, but you get the idea, right? That's how you type using Cypress. So once you have that in place, what we can do is probably click on this login button. And if you want, I think I have a data test ID with this as well. So there we go. We can say cy.get data test ID login.click and hit save. And you can see that when I click on this, and let's see, unrecognized expression data test ID, oops, this should be inside square brackets and we should be good to go, right? So now you can see that it fails, obviously, because this is a wrong set of combination of password. So one thing you could test is that, login should display correct error, right? So I can just try just a dummy sort of thing and it should just fail. Although there are better ways of doing this. We'll get into that when we learn about mocking the APIs, but let's stick with this for now. So we have an unable to authorize, please check username password combination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say right here, I'm going to say cy.contains unable to authorize. I can just use that much text for validation. No need to write the whole thing. Should exist, right? And at the top, when we visit the sign in, that is before entering username password, I can just say should not exist, right? Because we don't really want this to already exist and then just pass, right? So you can see everything passes. Why? Because you can see it did not exist when we started off the registration. We filled in the wrong username and password. And once we clicked on it, you can see that this automatically appeared and it was able to find it, right? So that's pretty cool stuff. So yeah, that's you have done a lot of work in this particular thing itself. You have tested that, the fields are typeable, right? You have tested the login button works. You have tested that if login does not succeed, the error message is correct. You have tested a bunch of stuff, right? So that's how you actually proceed with testing these things end to end and anyway. So that is pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one with some more awesome Cypress goodies. We'll finally log in into the interface first of all, and we're gonna get into all the good stuff from there on. That's all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next video. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and log in into our bad boy interface on codedamn and let's see and assert a few things on that particular page. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste this whole thing, and I'm just going to say login should work fine, right? And we visit sign in. I don't really want to check for this. And we want to click on login, but not really this. And I can just go ahead and replace this with iOS dev, right? So what's happening here essentially is that we are now logging in with a dummy account. I might probably change the password for this by the time you're watching this. So this is what happens, right? So let me just go ahead and put an it.only right here, hit save, and you can see that it very quickly just logged into the whole thing. And I would not recommend you to try this like, a lot of times on the codedamn website, because you will be rate limited very soon. But yeah, that's just for an informational purposes, or as a matter of fact, on any site you don't really own, because that might hurt their backends. So anyway, once the login works fine, what you can do is just sort of verify that, hey, am I on the right domain or right path? That is at least dashboard. That's what we can verify, right? So I can say URL dot, I don't know, dot include, no, should include dashboard, right? That should be the case, right? And that's fine. So for example, let's say if I have changed the user or the username, the password is incorrect, then this test would fail, which means that, hey, something went wrong. We are not on dashboard. So you might want to check that out. So that's how you would know that something is broken. For example, your interface or UI is broken or in any way. So that's how you can check. Another way would be to, just write test for dashboard itself. So if I have iOS dev here, then we can actually check certain elements on the dashboard, which we could probably use, right? Like achievements or, see leaderboards, stuff like this. So yeah, this is like one thing, how you can log into the user and check stuff. But I would be shifting this to local storage of the token. And right now, the way authentication works on codedamn is that you get a token inside localStorage dot this auth token right here, which you see, which is basically responsible for authenticating you on the backend service APIs as well. So what we can do is, instead of like logging in again and again for the sake of this demo, I can set this token on every single request as a local storage. So to do set this as local storage token for authentication, right? So this will make sure that we are always authenticated on codedamn if you want. So how we will do that, how we will manipulate local storage, that is again something for the next video. That's all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next video really soon. So what is going on, everybody? My name is Mehul and welcome back to another video in which, before actually taking a look at how we can set up local storage variables, let's just go ahead and take a look at an important hook sort of thing in Cypress, and that is the before and beforeEach. So let's see what both of them mean. We're going to be focusing on beforeEach in this video, not really the before one, because that will be covered in advanced section and all the other hooks as well. So beforeEach basically is a handy hook which allows you to run a certain piece of code before any or every of these it blocks run, right? So just like you see that we are repeating this visit command in every single one of them, right? And the viewport command as well. So what we can do is, instead of like, doing this on every single test, we can say that, hey, let's set it up the first time basic desktop test, because you can see that we are doing it before every single test. Get rid of this. And yep, that should run before every single test. So we can just go ahead and move all this stuff. Now, let's just go ahead and remove this, and this is also not necessary, right? So if I go ahead and if I save this, you're gonna see, well, let's just go ahead and remove the only from here. Go ahead and save this. You're gonna see that it pretty much works just fine, just like before. All the tests are working, and it's all working absolutely fine, right? But this makes your code a little bit organized and much more cleaner. And at the same time, for example, you can say these are basic unauthenticated, only if I could spell it right, desktop test, right? So let's say these are all basic unauthenticated desktop test, and in another file we want, you know, authenticated desktop test, in which in that before each we can not only just set the viewport but also set our local storage, which we'll see in the next video. But you know, you get the idea. This sort of is your bootstrapping external things, right? Local storage or cookies or, you know, viewport or URLs, all that stuff will go in right here. I'm just going to remove that because we are lazy and we'll do everything in the same file. But you know, you can segregate them if you want. So yeah, that's basically it for the before each hook. That's all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon, in which we'll be, just like I said, looking into local storage and stuff. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at how you can go ahead and set this token inside the local storage so that we get, you know, authenticated user on every single test. So Cypress by default does not come with a sort of, you know, like you would say that it's a convenient API, but it's not a very hard task anyway. So how you have to access the local storage is using the window variable. And the way you access window is you gotta get into cy.contains, and then you can use window right here. So you can say window.localStorage .set item if you want to be a API friendly boy. And what we have something like __auth__token as far as I remember. And this was the token with us, right? So that's it. So once we go ahead and hit save, what you're gonna see is that you can see on the top, when the tests are completed, basically when the test did not even start, we now have the URLs like dashboard, settings, and logger, which means that we are logged in, right? So that's how you set local storage in Cypress. And what you can do is probably instead of like putting this in a before each, you can just say, hey, I just want to set it once, because why do we have to, like, you know, just rewrite local storage again and again? In fact, what you can do is you can move this viewport also in before, because you just need to set it once. So if I go ahead and save this guy right here, you're gonna see that if I remove this only, you're gonna see that the test suite which we run, well, you know, obviously this test starts failing because, well, yeah, because we are not logged in anymore. And it also fails because we moved the viewport, because viewport gets reset on every single test. So you want to have your viewport inside before each only. I forgot that. So anyway, let's just go ahead and refresh this, and this test suite is going to fail because now we are authenticated, so we don't have those links. So that's tricky. So I'm just not going to, you know, get into the test in this particular file. Let's just go ahead and create a different file for that one. So I'm just gonna say auth test.test.js, or maybe, like, you know, instead of doing that, authenticated test.js, and paste it right here, basic authenticated desktop test, and we get the local storage ready, and that's pretty much it, right? That's it. So let's just throw in an it block, should pass, and there we go. That's pretty much it, right? And if we go ahead and go back to the test and click on authenticated ones now, you're gonna see that, well, now we are just running the authenticated suite with us. So let me just go ahead and move this real quick with this one. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. That's how you're gonna set up a little bit of local storage, and that's how you're going to organize your tests as well if you want. So I'm just going to get rid of this here real quick, but that's the crux of the video. So that's all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video really soon. So what is going on, everybody? My name is Mehul and welcome back to another video in which I wanted to tell you our further steps in the course, and that will be testing the codedamn playground. And the reason I wanted this to be, authenticated session in the very first place is because if you go to, let's see, dashboard, playgrounds, and if you click on this HTML CSS playground, what you're going to see is a very nice, although sort of sophisticated interface, which consists of all these files and, this browser window, which is an iframe. We got a canvas terminal, which is running right here. So all sorts of stuff. There's an editor in between. All sorts of stuff is happening, right? So this would be sort of a perfect place to actually test stuff, right? Maybe I can even discover a couple of bugs or so. So let's just go ahead and test this particular interface, see if this works or not according to how we expected, and all that stuff like that. So that is all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next video where we'll start testing this bad boy stuff real soon. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And first of all, let's see what elements we can test. So let me just go ahead and quickly go to dashboard, playgrounds, HTML, CSS, and you can see that we get a trying to establish message, not connected message. So let's just go ahead and first of all take a look at how we can pause stuff, right? So it just got open in a new tab. Oopsie, let's just go ahead and just see how we can pause stuff with Cypress, because that's gonna be a little bit handy in this one. So we should just say should load playground correctly. And I'm just gonna say cypress.visit, not viewport, visit this playground. And I'm just gonna say the moment you visit, just pause the stuff. Or maybe I could just say cypress.get div first of all, so that we can, sort of just be sure that there's a div which exists and all that stuff. Or maybe that's not a best idea, but what I wanted to say is the cy.pause method, that is cypress.pause. So let's just go ahead and run this one instead. And you can see right here, the execution is paused, right? So, well, the browser execution is not paused, but the Cypress code runner execution is paused, right? So you can see it's actually waiting for me to hit this resume button. And the moment I do it, then it will continue with its execution. Well, it does not have anything yet. So that's all it will happen. That's all it will do. There's another method called debug, right? So this debug right here, it's gonna just freeze your JS thread, but this requires you to open your dev tools. Now, if you have used JavaScript, it's basically the debugger, which you see, right? So you're actually setting a debugger point using cypress.debug. So let me just go ahead and save this here real quick with debug now. And if we see right here, you can see it has actually hit a debugger point, right? So that's pretty cool. And now I can just go ahead and see that the state of JavaScript is completely frozen, and I can see the bunch of messages, how it looks like when it's trying to first connect. The JS thread is frozen at the moment. So a bunch of things, I can see that we have a not connection yet, which is again, I just realized this is a typo. So it should be no connection yet, trying to connect. We have a trying to establish connection. We have a logo, we have a connecting button. So all that stuff, we can actually test that should be the state. So I can just say cy.contains. I can say trying to connect, and I can just say cy.log checking for sidebar, and this is like sidebar should exist. You can throw in an assertion if you want, kind of looks cool on the console. Then you can get this connecting thing. So you can say cy.log checking bottom left button, and you can throw in a cy.contains connecting should exist. I don't remember if I have a data ID for this thing or not. Let's see if I do have. Looks like yes, I do, but inside it's basically the whole thing, right? So I probably have to like throw around a little bit of jQuery here. So maybe maybe what I can say is cy.get data test ID, external controls, the immediate div of this thing, that is this particular thing, should include, or maybe like I want to get the text first. Now, how do I get the text first? Now you can see that inside should should have text, or if I just say should include text, we have this stuff. Ideally, I should go with this. But what else you could do is you can get the reference of this div itself using the then, just like we did earlier. And then you can just play around with the inner text or inner HTML. I don't know. It's too huge. So you know, you can just console log. This is basically not really inner text. This is an actual jQuery object. So you can use the text method right here, and you can say expect text to equal, you know, whatever your text is connecting or whatever. So this is one way. I'm just telling you all the ways you have. The other way, which is kind of like recommended, I would recommend to do that because that is much more Cypressy. Should contain.text, and this should be connecting, right? Connecting. There we go. So that's our second test, right? The next one, let's see, trying to establish connection. We want to check that. So that's again an important thing. So let's just say I have Cypress.get trying to establish establish connection should also be something which is found, right? And a final check is that you can say once we have found this, I can say cy.log terminal, or maybe like I could say playground is initializing. And now I want to make sure that playground is in fact initialized. So what I can say again is I can say cy.get the same element trying to establish connection should not exist, right? Because I'm expecting, now this might seem weird if you read this, that hey, let me just go ahead and remove this. This code is perfectly fine, you know, why? Because this line is expected to be there the moment Cypress testing begins, because, you know, it takes a couple of seconds to get established connection first of all. And then Cypress should ideally wait for this element to vanish away, right? It should not exist. So we can just insert a simple console log statement in between that, and we should be good to go. Let me just go ahead and comment this out and see how this works. So if I go ahead and save and close this out, and it should ideally run our test again. So let's see if I can just force that up. So yeah, you can see it's waiting for it, waiting, but something went wrong, right? You can see expected to find trying to establish. Okay, so it actually did not find it in the first place. So let's see. I might have, yeah, might have a typo here. So I can just go with trying to establish. Why not? Right, so trying to establish, we don't see it. I think we are way too slow for that. I don't know, let's see. So I'm just gonna throw in a console here. I'm gonna set up a debugger point, hit save. That's how you debug issues with Cypress, right? That's a good way, sort of. And you will want to throw it a little bit above, because it already just waits for you at that point. So at this point, trying to establish connection. I don't see what's the problem. So let's see, trying to establish connection. Oh, I get the problem. It should be contains, right? Because that is not a valid selector. Well, the more you learn. Trying to establish connection, and this should also be contains. There we go. Hit save, close down, reload, and let it run. So you see, we get the trying to establish, and we, you know, just make sure that it is not present. Setting up the challenge is also something. So we can say as a second step, I can say cy.contains, setting up the challenge. That's the second step. And the third step is that trying to establish and setting up is not present at all. Both are not present. So I can say this is the third step because, this one actually just vanishes when the setting up the challenge is existing. So I can say should exist and then it should not exist. That's a pretty, wild statement if you're somebody who is reading it for the first time. So you can see, if I refresh this, you're going to see we kind of make a close call on this. The progress bar is about to expire in some cases. So what you can do is you can increase the timeout of individual sort of commands as well. And we're going to see that how we can do that in the next video. So that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next one really soon. Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at how we can set timeouts on individual commands, right? So if we go ahead and just refresh this test, you're going to see that on every test, you have this little blue bar sort of thing, which is like getting spended up real quick. So this denotes the timeout of your script, right? By timeout, what I mean is that if that hits 0, your test would fail. That's like a default timeout Cypress comes with every single scripting tag. So how you can just come about that is you can increase or decrease it if you like. So for example, just like I told you that this should not exist might take a little bit more depending on, if there's a little bit more load on the server or maybe your network connection is slow, any sort of thing. So in order to give you a safe buffer after, having your first argument in contains, or as a matter of fact in anything, the second argument is you can specify this timeout. And this timeout is in milliseconds, not in seconds. So I can say that, hey, I want this this task to at least wait for 10 seconds. So this is like 10 seconds right here. So I'm going to hit save. And now you're going to see that the bar for that would move much slower than before. The default timeout before was 4 seconds. But however, if I just change this to 1 second, it's just gonna immediately expire and our test will probably fail, right? So you can see our test failed because this particular command timed out, even though, functionality wise, it's working just fine. So, you get the idea that how you have to work with timeouts in general. Just increase them beyond a little bit safe point if your task might take a little bit longer. By default, if you go to, you're going to see this in your settings right here. And inside configuration, you're going to see the default command timeout is 4000, which is 4 seconds. And now instead of like overriding the whole, timeout thing for every command, you can also specify very granularly like this on a per command basis. But I would just recommend you setting a high timeout only for commands which would take a lot of time. Otherwise, you will just unknowingly increase your total test time if a single command is bound to fail. So yeah, that's pretty much it on how timeouts are gonna work in Cypress. That's all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and test sort of a tricky functionality. So what I want to test is that because, the terminal inside codedamn interface and this file explorer are actually linked. So if I go ahead and create a file here, let's say touchx.js, you're going to see that that file actually gets reflected in your UI automatically after a second at max. So I want to test this functionality if this works fine or not, which is if you think about it, it's a lot of code being covered, both on front end and back end. So how do we do that? Well. First things first, I want to type something in this command prompt, right? So I want to get reference to this particular canvas. And if we take a look inside here, you should see that I should have this data text ID x term with us, right? So first of all, I want to get this div and I want to start typing in it. And just like I said, Cypress is smart enough in most of the cases to figure out what the typeable element is inside that particular parent. And in this case, it would figure it out. So let's just go ahead and create, we can create a new test as well, but I can just continue right here because I already have a little bit of checks going on. So I can just say new file, or let's just go ahead and create a new test because that's what the thing is, right? That's the whole point of having multiple tests. So I'm going to throw in an only right here, and I'm just going to say that new file feature works. Now we visit the URL, we check for sidebar. Because we have already done these tasks, what I like to do is I just like to just throw in something like this, right? So this way we are just waiting for the execution environment to be ready, right? And once we do that, what I want to do is I want to say cy.get, and you can see that we had that data xterm, whatever it was, xterm, I think, yeah. So data test ID xterm, and now I want to write something in that. But there would be a problem. Why? Because you see there's a sort of a server already running, but you see that we have the Control-C option to shut it down. So first of all, let me just show you what's the problem would be. So let's say if I want to add, let's say touch test script.js, right? And if I hit save, you're gonna see we run the test just fine, trying to establish connection, all that stuff, setting up challenge. Well, we are just a little bit early, so let's just go ahead and do this. And let's see, trying to establish connection should exist. Or rather, instead of doing this, why not just go ahead and throw it a timeout of 7 seconds. And actually, I think I got the error. This was the error actually, not the other one. But here we have it. Setting up the challenge still exists. So you can see right here, if you were able to see, it just wrote this touch TypeScript.js real quick, TestScript.js. Now, obviously this did not work because we have a running server. We have to press Control-C in order to quit it. So how do you press Control-C inside Cypress? Well, inside Cypress, what you can do is you can make use of special keys in the following way. So you say type right here, and I can change type with types. I like to keep these special key access controls separate from the text-based input. So you can say type Control-C, right? So whatever you type inside these curly braces are going to be interpreted as special keys, right? And control obviously is registered as a special key. But if I write D, E, F, J, any sort of combination, just a single letter combination right here, that will work. Similarly, Control-Tab would work, Control-A would work, all that stuff. But right now we want Control-C, then we want touch TestScript, but at the end, we also want to hit an enter, right? Because that's how you enter the command. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and let's see what happens. So you're back on the home page, trying to establish connection, setting up environment, all that good stuff. And you can see immediately our server gets canceled, and we see a touch TestScript.js executing command. And right here, you can see that TestScript.js in fact exists, which is pretty cool, right? Now, let's say I want to see if I have contains TestScript.js with me in the DOM. Exist. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the test, right? Because if this file exists, because that was a completely random file, then it's fine. I mean, you can just spice up things a little bit more if you want by probably saying like, const file name is math.random, and you can say this is like TestScript. This is the actual file name. Right? And now you can just say TestScript. That particular file should exist, just to remove, any sort of non-randomness. So let's just go ahead and save this and see if this passes our test or not. So it runs just like we would expect. It creates a file, which is a weird file name, but we find that particular span tag inside our DOM, right? So we find the span, and right here, if we see, it says DOM snapshot pinned. And if I go to console, you're going to see this is the span tag which we find. And if you just hover over this element, this is exactly the span which Cypress finds out, right? So we see that our element exists in the DOM, in the actual DOM, which was created from the canvas, which is pretty cool stuff, right? So this test works as expected. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. How you're gonna, I hope you learned a bunch of new things, especially with the typing stuff in this video, but that's how you're gonna test files or, just new files on codedamn, which is sort of specific, but I hope you understood how you can use modifier keys, how you should go about things, how you can use timeout and all that stuff. So that is all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon. So what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at how we can check if the rename functionality works. Now, what the rename functionality is I can just go ahead and right click on this one, click on rename, enter a new name like styles.css or JS or whatever, click on rename, and it'll just take a couple of seconds to update it, right? So in order to test this, again, it has a bunch of stuff. You have to right click. First of all, you have to click on this. You have to do all sorts of work. So how do you do that is with the help of right clicking in Cypress. Now, let's just go ahead and copy paste first of all this test suite, and I'm just going to remove only from this one so that we are running only one thing at a time. We visit the URL again, we wait for the challenge to set up. Ideally, you can move this to beforeEach if you want, right? Because this is seems to be repetitive stuff now. Then we have a file name. I'm just slicing it to a little bit less digits. Then we create that file. That's particularly absolutely fine. We can also test this. Then the next thing which I want is I want to say that cy.contains, actually I want the same thing, but instead of should exist, I want to say, hey, can we just right click on you, right? So if I go ahead and say that and hit save, let's see what happens. It loads the editor just fine, and we create the new file. It's waiting for the file, and you can see that we get that nice little drop down of rename and delete file. So that means it's working absolutely fine. So once we have right clicked, we know that rename file would exist on the DOM. So I'm just going to say rename file dot click like this and hit save. And once you do that, I think it might be working. Yep, so it's working fine. So once we are into this particular interface, we now want to type into this particular thing, right? So the next thing is, let's just take a look at if we have anything related to test ID, and you can see we do have rename file folder available with us. So the next thing I'm just gonna say is cy.get data test ID is rename file folder, and type something else. So I want to say, let's say I want to go with the same name, but I want to say that this is new underscore this thing, or maybe new underscore, that's it, .this.js, right? Let's just go ahead and hit save, and that would actually create this. But what I want to test is that, hey, now this particular thing right here should not exist, right? Because we have just renamed it, so it should not exist. And what should exist, in fact, is the new name. Should exist, right? Okay, so let's see. We set up the challenge. We start the server, we create the new file, we rename it, but we are obviously not clicking rename file yet. So let's do that first of all. Once we type in, we're gonna say contains rename file dot click. We missed that. Hit save. Let's try it one more time. And let's see. So it's working fine. Everything is being automated. We are not finding the rename file button for some reason, because this element is not visible. Okay, so it looks like Cypress is saying that, hey, somehow the element is not visible. Now this might be because of, I don't know, that should probably not happen. Let's try with the test ID. Maybe it's picking up some other element. So instead of contains, I'm just gonna say, that's why, test IDs like these are helpful, because Cypress might be picking up some other element at this point. Rename button dot click. Let's see. Well, you can technically go ahead and debug that as well, but I did not just spend a lot of time into that yet. So we create a new file. Yep. that was a bug with the file. And you can see basically the test passes, right? Because you see all sort of work is done. So it's kind of like cool, right? So you know that if this is working, that means your code is not broken. That means, you know, this functionality is working. So you can very confidently ship your changes. So that's like one reason I love Cypress so much, and in general testing so much, because it allows you to ship code with such confidence. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You can just go back a little bit in time as well if you want to see how the things are working. You know, you can just hover over things and it'll just show you. That's the crux of how you're gonna test stuff with Cypress, right? So that's all for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon. Hey guys, thank you so much if you have been watching this far along, and if you are, I'm pretty sure you are much more interested in getting a deep dive into Cypress, even more, like we'll just complete the playground testing and all that stuff with Cypress. But there's gonna be an advanced section as well where we discuss some of the advanced sides of Cypress, as well as deploying it on GitHub as a CI/CD tool. So if you want to get access to the full course, you can use codedamn.com to watch this complete course. You have to go to Learning Paths, Front-End Developer, and just click on your Cypress right here inside code testing. Otherwise, you can find all the relevant links in the description below. The rest of the course is a lead subscription-based course, which you can enroll for $13 a month or 999 rupees a month, which is probably about a Udemy course, but you get the features and you get the availability of all the courses right here which are listed. You know, all these particular courses get unlocked. All these learning paths, well, the ones which are available as of now, get unlocked. All the practice projects get unlocked, and all the playgrounds get unlocked for a price of about a Udemy course, right? So if you want to support the platform, if you want to support the whole initiative of codedamn, it would mean a world to me if you can go ahead and continue this course on codedamn.com, first of all, using the lead subscription. So you can again find all the relevant links in the description below. That is all for this particular video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a comment and like the video. That really helps in order to reach out to more people. So that is all. I'm gonna see you in the next one on codedamn.com.